So happy Saturday, everyone. We are here at the SUP Brand Hospital for one of our health briefs. Actually, this is the start of this series as we're preparing for 2025. Here at the Brand Hospital, we specialize in helping nonprofits breathe life back into their organizations in the areas of attention, collaboration, and engagement to drive impact and increase donations. A part of this series is all about being able to tell you what your doctor would tell you. And with that, we are bringing in experts in each field, subject matter experts, so they can share their experience, their advice. So therefore, all of our listeners who are on this walk can be in a best position as they're entering 2025, have a roadmap to prepare themselves for epic results. So with that, I would like to introduce you all to my colleague, my partner in crime, I would say. I can't do my work without her because she's all about numbers. Miss Katrina L. Martin of WOW Tax and Advisory Services. Welcome in, girl. Welcome
Thank
in.
you. Thank you, Shantelle. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you taking the time on a Saturday right before the holiday, but I think we both agree that it's important that we have conversations as such, because regardless of everyone being able to spend time and have holiday, business doesn't stop. And
Absolutely.
they should always be in the mindset of understanding what it's going to look like. So, with that, tell us a little bit about your journey and what led you into this career of tax preparation, accounting, financial
Yeah.
planning, and of course, go down your resume because I don't want to miss out on anything.
Yeah, so I had an interesting journey to come to this accounting space. I opened a Wild Tax and Advisory Service firm in 2015, but I actually started in this industry back in the early 2000s. So I'm well over 20 years in. And my journey, I'm based out of Michigan, but I support clients nationwide. We work with business owners in the for-profit space and the nonprofit space, specializing in advisory services, all things taxes, accounting, and the likes. Like I said, I started at this particular firm in 2015, but started in the accounting space back in 2002. One of the things that led me to this, I took, I started off in the Air Force, lived in Alaska for 8 years, went to school, got a degree in marketing, management, and accounting. Well, accounting came later, but
Yeah.
that was a cool thing. And so worked, and so I kind of did both things for a long time. I was a director at marketing firms for a long time, and then, but always had my business too. But what led me to move more into my business full time was the need. I was meeting so many business owners, especially those that look like us, who were struggling to get to the next level or figure things out, and just kind of working in a circle and never able to cross those goal marks that they put in place for themselves. And finance is just, I love numbers. I love everything about them.
Mhm.
And I love being able to tell a story with numbers. So it was just kind of like a one of those things that you kind of run from for a long time, but you ultimately get shifted back to where you're supposed to be. So this is how I ended up here. And so like I said, I have this firm. We have bookkeepers on staff. We have tax preparers on staff, advisors. So we really, and then I'm hands-on. So most of the clients, I introduce them into the organization and figure out what their needs are, and then develop a plan for them.
Gotcha. So I wanted you to do that because I know that as we're here, people really don't care about what you do until they understand why you do it. And so understanding that background and really what I was hearing in your response is that everything always leads back to the money and the numbers.
It
And so
does.
given today's conversation is centered around the bookkeeping mastering, how would you define bookkeeping?
I define bookkeeping this in the simplest way, and that's one of the things that makes me a little different from most accountants is that I don't I don't talk as as an accountant. I actually talk to people in layman's terms, so you can understand it. I think a lot of people turn off when they can't understand what you're talking about. So
Hmm.
bookkeeping in my world is really figuring out what the business is really doing, what the numbers are doing. How much income are you bringing in? How much expenses? How much are the expenses? What's going out? What's left over? What are you overspending on? What can you cut back on? You really can't tell. A lot of times we tell people to create a budget. how do you create a budget if you don't even know what your expenses are going to be? How do you track what those are? How do you maintain? And if you're going too far, how do you pull back and where? And a lot of times if you don't have bookkeeping, you don't know those things. You're kind of just you're driving the car with your hands in front of your eyes, and it's that's how I find a lot of business what a lot of business owners are doing, and which is why a lot of businesses start to fail at about year 5, is because they've
Mhm.
been self-funding for so long, and then they get to a point, it's like, is this a hobby? Well,
Right.
and and so if you actually doing the bookkeeping, you can kind of rein yourself in and understand, okay, these are the goals that I have. This is my mission, and this is the steps that I need to take to do that. And then track to make sure that you're on target on a consistent basis.
Right. And then what would you say would be the difference, because you do work with both businesses, nonprofits, and many different ventures? What's the
Mhm.
difference between doing bookkeeping for a nonprofit?
I think it's essentially the same, but here's the thing with nonprofits: there's a little more um, eyes on your books than in a for-profit space, because in a nonprofit is an entity within itself.
Right.
Nobody owns a nonprofit. The nonprofit owns itself. So if people are donating and you're getting grants, those people have access to see those reported numbers. Whereas if you're a private business owner, you don't necessarily have to show anybody those numbers if you're not in a public space. Whereas a nonprofit, if somebody's giving you money, they may ask to see those reports. Or if you're requesting money, they want to see where you are currently. So those things, you need to always have those things ready to go and clean so you can get to additional funds. So I feel like in the nonprofit space, it's probably more important for you to have bookkeeping than even in the for-profit space. You need it in both worlds to make sure that you're doing the right things and to see that you're even actually, what are you doing? Is this working or is it not working? But in a
Right.
profit space, you do have additional requirements to share that information.
Right. And so when looking at just how here at the Brand Hospital, how we look at organizations, we look at two things. Of course, we look at size, but we also look at their level of revenue.
Yes.
And some people are sometimes off put when you hear revenue, because when you hear nonprofit, in your mind is like, oh, we're doing this for free. Well, by definition, charity, sure, you can, do a charity and you can take all of your personal income and just begin to just throw it into, your work. But ultimately, if you want to be a stable, organization that's really ready to scale, when coming into us, we look at the three categories. So the first being level one would be a startup or a charity that's moving into being an organization, or 501(c)(3) that's from 0 to 250,000, right? Level two to be an organization that's 300 to 500,000, that typically has, maybe 4 to 5 employees, has a program, has consistent, revenue coming in, at least getting to that 3 to 500,000 each year. And then that third level would be 550 to 1 million plus. Right. So when looking at that and looking at the conversation of bookkeeping, what is the design of a startup versus someone who's stable at that 300 to 500,000, versus one that's ultimately already established, it's ready to scale, and is very, very stable.
I think the attention of the person running the organization, and maybe typically that's the founder, right? A lot of
Mhm.
nonprofits stay in that startup phase because they aren't managing the things in a structured way and treating it as a true business. Because the fact of the matter is you can only grow if you're getting the grants and you're getting the donations that you need. You can only self-fund so much, right? And so
Mhm.
the point of trying to get to that stage 2 or stage 3 really means you're forming a team. And in order to form a team, you got to have some money there to do so. And so a lot of times I think people start it from a passion project, but
Mhm.
from that, you really have to put your business hat on. And sometimes the person who starts the organization may not be the best person to run the organization. You have the passion for it, but from a business perspective, maybe there's somebody else that would be a better CEO in the space of leading to get to those next levels. So really just sitting down and being honest with yourself and having a plan. You
Mhm.
really cannot just throw darts at a wall and hope something lands. And I find that's a lot of times it's like, oh, I started this because I want to help the kids with this and that. And it's like, perfect. Okay, so what is the plan? And
Right.
everybody has the mission, but what's the plan to get that mission accomplished, right? And so
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of people run out of the gate excited, and then when you realize, oh, this is a really daily thing that I got to do,
Yep.
and there's real expectations and requirements, not only from the state, but from the federal government as well. I got to button this up. And if that's not your forte, if you're more creative and things like that, you may need somebody that's more analytical to manage that part of the business to make sure that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's.
Absolutely. Because you're right. When people are starting organizations, it's typically led off of passion, but passion alone is not going to be enough fuel to get done what you really ultimately want to get done. And
Absolutely.
so you mentioned something about being able to be a leader. And sometimes if you don't have the business acumen, you also can't identify what the problems are. You also need somebody to come in and tell you what they are. So what would you say are some of the most common things that you will see? And let's go based off each level. So for a
Mhm.
level one, looking at a startup, what are the things that are most common happening at that point? And then level two, then level three.
Level one, it's usually lack of funding. There's just no money and you self-fund thing, and you're trying to get everybody to buy in on it, and you just don't have the credibility yet. So you're trying to build that up. So
Right,
that's level one. You're trying to get to that where this is a real thing that I'm really doing this, and I really need the support. So you're really just trying to get the go-to-market, the launch, right?
right.
Level two, you've got employees. It's a real thing now. You've started this, you got this foundation. Now you got to really get serious about it. This is where you really do have to decide what role you're going to play in that business and who the other team players that are going to come in and help it plant the additional seeds to help it grow, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can only go so far on your own. Solopreneurs, you can make good money, but in this type of organization where you're really trying to get to that next level, that level two requires you to bring in team players, and you're going to need to bring in the strongest and the brightest people to really take it to level three. And level three is where you really ultimately, if you're really trying to grow your nonprofit, that's where your eyes should be on that prize. And that's where that person who founded it may take a step back and
Yeah.
say, okay, let me let these other people play in this space, because these are the perfect people to make sure that this not only grows but sustains, because you can get a huge grant and put it into, but you need more. It's cash flow. you know
Exactly.
it's cash,
Yep.
because there's expenses, right? So you may be paying staff and those things at level two. You got a huge grant. How are you going to keep paying people, and how are you going to get to the next level? You've got to keep the wheels churning, and sometimes you gotta get out of your own way sometimes. But really, it's really being focused, and like you said, just having business acumen to know when it's time to shift gears and move to the next levels.
I'm really glad you brought that up because, as a grant writer, people may not always want to talk about money, but they're always looking for money. And of course, they're always trying to get it. Mostly because, to be in a nonprofit, you need money to run your programs, to make sure you have people around. Most people are wearing all of 50 million hats and they're trying to do it all themselves. And then when they're writing the grant or have someone like myself come in and write the grant, and I ask the question, well, who's a part of your team? Because what the funder wants to see, they want to see itemized budgets and line items based on personnel, people, and programming. And if you can't do that, or even just be in a headspace of understanding how you have to operate as a well-oiled machine, that's going to look to them that you're not an organization that's in compliance and you're more of a liability and they're going to pass.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I find with a lot of nonprofits is they don't get their board organized properly. A lot of times when you
Mhm.
come in, you're bringing in friends and family, but over time, that board may need to shift, because if you're trying to get into the next doors to get to that next set of money, you're going to have board members that people can say, okay, we know with these thought leaders in place that this money is going to go to the right place, and that you're going to be able to achieve all the goals that you have. And that, but you have to have making sure that revisiting your board too, because like I said, a nonprofit is its own entity. So you may
Right.
start it because if this was your passion project, but it's like delivering a baby. You don't know what you're going to produce, what personality they're going to come out, and they're their own person when they come out. That's truly a nonprofit. It's its own
Right.
living thing, and the people that you're going to get to help support you raise it, your village, they have to be really, you need to know who they are and that the roles that they're going to play, and that they're going to be properly guiding this organization to grow.
Right. And when I love to say this all the time, when looking at just history of this country, nonprofits have always been a lever of wealth.
Yeah.
And quite often, if we don't use it as the lever it's meant to be, then we're putting ourselves in a space where we're just treating it as a job, or we're just treating it as something that can start and stop versus something that can build a legacy and the foundation of really giving back and really being able to touch on some of those lacks in systems and disparities in like economic growth that we see. So with that, for people who are just starting their journey, I think we were talking the other day how sometimes people just, for the excitement of saying that they have a nonprofit, would go register and like, oh yeah, I started this nonprofit, call their sister, call their mom, get their auntie involved, their best friend from school, and these aren't the best people to be around. Yes, sure, for trust.
Mhm.
However, if they have never run a nonprofit, you don't want to necessarily have them on your board. Especially, you need people, like you said, who have the background in finance, who have a network, who have influence, both politically and community based, because you need people out there verbalizing and putting your organization in a position where it's constantly in people's mouths, right? And so when looking at all of that work that outside internal people are doing outside, what then therefore when they start looking at your organization and they start looking, the first thing they're going to look at is your books. So for those who are just starting this journey, who may not have the budget, may not have the acumen of like understanding, okay, what does good bookkeeping even look like, where
Mhm.
would someone like that start?
I think booking a strategy session once you decide that this is something you're going to do. So we do strategy sessions. Some people book an hour, 30 minutes, some people book an hour, some people book an hour and a half. At least have that first initial sit down before you start playing in the space, because a lot of times people make decisions and they're hard to back out of. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to get in something, it's hard to get out of it. So before you make those decisions and you're just guessing and trying to go to YouTube University or TikTok University, talk to an talk to an expert in the space, because we spend a lot of time just doing cleanup to fix things that people started off doing. And when I ask, what made you do this? Oh, I saw it on such and such. And it's like, oh, but this is hard to get out of because you got to do these things. Oh, we got these donations. We didn't need them anymore, so we sold them. And then what'd you do with the money? Oh, we put it, you closed the nonprofit and you sold the things and that you donated, you need to donate that to another nonprofit, because
Right.
this isn't your thing, right? This isn't a
Yeah.
living thing. And so just having the understanding of what really has to happen, the requirements, there's requirements. To get nonprofit status means you're not having to be taxed on this income. That's a big thing. That's truly a big
Huge.
thing. Huge, huge.
Yeah.
So when you do this, you think that there's not 1,000 eyes on you to make sure that everything is in place. So actually starting out in this space, at least book a strategy session before you start putting the wheels in motion. If you can't afford monthly bookkeeping at that time, think about doing quarterly bookkeeping where you pay quarterly, or
Mm.
at some point somebody needs to get in there and look at the numbers, track the numbers and see what's happening for you. What I find a lot of times is people come to us in January and say, we probably need to file, we probably need to file our taxes. And then they're starting to send over receipts and bank statements and all of that. And I'm like,
And it's all over the place because they have gone a full year without keeping track of it. And they know because you're like, oh, you needed that receipt? I thought it was a small thing. It's just like,
receipts
no,
balled up.
every single dime.
And we used to unravel receipts. We gave that up a long time ago. That's bookkeeping. If we unravel receipts, that's bookkeeping, right? So what we want to help you do is to help you properly structure from the beginning, even if we're not going to be doing the monthly maintenance to start, help you get the setup in place, just so,
Right.
and then we can come in at the end of the year to do the cleanup until you get the funds to let us do it on a regular basis. The first influx of capital that you get, that should be the role that you put in place. You need somebody managing your books, because a lot of times in order to get to to get that grant approval, they're going to want, and we're going to be talking about this in our next session, audited
Yep.
financial statements. And you can't have audited financial statements if you don't have financial statements, if you don't have bookkeeping.
Right. All right. Well, So with that, you kind of touched on it slightly,
Yes.
but I'm going to bring it back up. And you said when they get information from over here.
Yeah.
So I took that as saying, okay, when people go online, they go on TikTok, they watch these videos, they listen to, because everyone wants to be an online guru now.
Yep.
Um, or they find themselves in a position where they've been scammed before, maybe not on this journey, or maybe in the beginning of this journey, or whatever it may be, somewhere along the way, they're being scammed. And in their mind, they're like, I need to do everything myself. I don't want to trust nobody. I'm not relinquishing anything over. This is what I'm doing. What would you say to individuals like that?
I say you're right to be to open up your financial information, your private information to someone is critical. So one of the things I do recommend is looking to see if somebody's licensed. I'm an enrolled agent, so I'm actually licensed through the Internal Revenue Service. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so that doesn't come easy. And so we have requirements. We have to do continuing education yearly. We had to take all these tests to get licensed in this space. We have to keep our own stuff in working in order to keep this going. So I represent clients before the Internal Revenue Service when they're have back tax debt or getting liens or being, audited and all those things. So find somebody that's credentialed and licensed, because you know that they're not gonna lose their licensing to do something scurvy, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, there are some bad characters in everything, but for the most part, if you see somebody in a space, look for the licensing and the credential, especially in the financial space, because you want to make sure that somebody else has a fiduciary responsibility. They answer to somebody else.
Correct. Those are the facts, Katrina. I mean, listen. Because if you don't do that, then it's kind of like you put yourself in a position where if you didn't do the math enough, you put your organization and yourself in a position to get scammed
Yeah,
or feel like you're getting scammed because people prey on that. They pray
absolutely.
that you don't have, the information and knowledge required. So to your point, set up some time, get a good understanding of the type of tools, technologies, resources that could be read, even just put yourself in the best position to make decisions.
Absolutely.
Because if you are the founder, you're a leader, like you are in that position to, be held liable to what's happening with your organization on every
Absolutely.
level. So,
Yeah, and follow your gut too. Sometimes if you get a bad vibe, move on, And
mhm,
if you can't meet with somebody and talk to them, if it's just all rigmarole and you can't ever see, do a session like this, then just start to ask additional questions. And if go with your gut. That's always your guardian angel telling you, guiding you there. But the one thing is you're not going to get to level 2 on your own.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
You're not going to get to level 2 on your own. You'll stay at level 1, because that you're running a one-man race, so that level 2 requires that you bring in additional people, and you need some cash to do so.
Correct. Because even just at the 250, I mean, 250 is such just a dynamic milestone to have just in general, because it shows that you are an accredited investor as an organization. Therefore institutions, financial institutions will be looking at you differently. You're looking at family offices and folks like that. They're like, oh, you're taking it serious, because the assumption is at 250, you at least have 5 people at 50,000, and you're working on that next step of making sure your executive director can actually take in that salary that's needed to really put your organization in a position to thrive in excellence and not be on crutches. You know?
Absolutely.
Where
Yeah.
you find yourself in a position where you're begging for money and then you call and, you know, try to bug me to be your grant writer because you're like, we don't have any money, but we're trying to do this. And it's just like, okay, let's focus on making sure that number one, we stabilize you at that 250 mark. Because otherwise, again, the IRS is going to give you 3 years
Hmm.
to get everything buttoned up and have everything in place so you can get over that $50,000 mark. And, one of the things about understanding that number is even in this conversation, even below 50,000, you should have your books in order because by the time you jump, and it can happen quickly,
Hmm.
right? If you just be consistent, understand what your cause, mission, and impact goals are, and you focus on finding a program that puts you in that space,
Yeah.
then, by the time they're going to make a phone call with you, and if they started right by having that first initial conversation where you say, hey, over the next year or so, next 6 to 12 months, next 6 to 18 months, you should be able to hit your $250,000 mark. Should you be able to do A, B, and C?
Yes, absolutely. And I find,
Oh,
and I'm glad that you mentioned the 3-year mark too, Shantelle, because a lot of businesses open, well, a lot of nonprofits were formed during the pandemic, and a lot are closed. A lot have been revoked. Statuses have been revoked over the last 3 years because people were not even at the under $50,000 mark. You still have a requirement to file the card with the IRS, and that's due May 15th. People were not doing that because they're like, oh, I didn't meet the criteria to have to file a 990 return. You still have a requirement to report, even
yeah.
if you're reporting that you made under 50,000. But how do you know if you made under 50,000 if you're not even tracking the income?
Come on. Come on. Like, I just know I didn't make any money. How do you know that?
How do you know? Where's it at? So the money's going in, the money's so but how do you know what you actually brought in? We're not talking about what's left over after expenses. We're talking about what came in. And so how do you know what came in? It doesn't take a lot for 50K to come in.
It doesn't. And it also doesn't take a lot for 250,000 to come in. It can happen in 1 grant.
It
Should you
can.
have everything in order on paper, the narrative is right, and you hire a good grant writer like myself. No.
You've been getting the big bucks in, Chantel, under the
I have. I was going through and looking at I even tally the grants I write. I keep track of, like, okay, I put this grant in for this client, and even for myself, like, I keep a track record of how much that could potentially come in. So, but on potential, it was over 3 million of potential in grants. And as of now, like today, and there's still time, because there's still time between now and December 31st to hear, but we've already are at $1.2 million that were brought in for just grant writing for clients. So,
crazy.
I mean, I'm happy
Love
about
it.
that. And I
I
was
love it.
that's why it's important we have this conversation, because even as they're on this journey of tracking up from that level 1 to level 2 to level 3, they're still on a very much so journey with their finances, their books, and making sure everything is just super buttoned. Because again, you can go from a 250,000 and go to a million, like almost in order,
Yeah.
if you have it on books properly, because you have family offices and also corporations and corporate partners who are looking for long-term grant opportunities, so they don't have to do any more work of trying to find the best organizations to work with. That's why they continue to still give the same organizations money every year over and over and over again, because their books are right. It's easy. You put us in a position where we get to write this off. You're doing good work. We look good. You look good. Let's go. You know?
Absolutely. I think a lot of times, like I said, people starting the nonprofits and are like, "This is my baby. I got to keep it close." Well, you gotta change it and track it too, because a lot of times you can't. That is probably the biggest blockade for people, is because you can't even get to the grants, you can't even get to the donations, because they want to see what you've done.
They do.
and, and not just in the newspaper. They want to see what you've done on the books. Really, the rubber meets the roads at the books. There's 3 important statements that are produced in the books. One is the income statement. That's the income that you brought in, and the expenses. So that shows what's net. There's the balance sheet that shows the liabilities and the assets of the company. That's important for the financial piece, because they need to know, who do you owe? What do you have as far as equipment, and what are the things that are the assets that you have in the organization? That is so important for a nonprofit. You have to track those assets. These are not your things. This belongs to this nonprofit. This
Correct.
all needs to live on this balance sheet. And then financially, the cash flow statement, to see what's expected to come in, what's needed to maintain on a monthly basis, what's the expectation, and what's been the peaks and valleys in the business. That statement is so important, because, and those are the 3 key pieces that any organization is going to want to see to make a determination for you, and what's next for you.
Something just came to mind that I want to talk to you about, and just so the people can hear from
Okay.
So One thing that we talk about are donations, and people in their mind, they always think that donations have to do with money. Or sometimes they'll think about, some donations of products, right?
Yeah.
So the in-kind donations. But for us, we look at it as time, energy, and assets. So when looking at time, and having like professionals who are donating their time and the level of advice, should you
Mm-hmm.
be able to pay them their hourly rate? So, say for instance, you have an attorney who takes a liking to your organization and they want to just be able to provide some advice. You're always able to call and they're like, oh, no, no charge.
Mm-hmm.
I know one of the most dynamic things that you can do with books because you're a nonprofit is take that time, even though that becomes an in-kind as well,
Yeah,
and making that a part of your bookkeeping and your line item of assets that are brought into your organization, right? Where at the end of the day, you can deliver out a contribution letter to even the attorney. They didn't give you money, but they gave you their time. And should you be able
absolutely.
to pay for them, and you talk to them, once a quarter and they're charging $300 an hour, that's $1,200 that put on your book of like just advice
Absolutely.
or of income. Like, I guess you
Like
get
it.
it, but just
Yeah,
being able
no,
to talk about that because that's the thing that I believe that most people miss out on.
absolutely.
Because
Yeah,
even
I
though
think.
in-kind donations,
And
right?
that's really real because at the end of the year, and one thing about so nonprofits and the timeline is a little different than your personal income tax and all of those things. So nonprofits are due the tax filings are due May 15th, right? And if
Mm-hmm.
extension in place, you get 6 months additional. So then it's the extension's due to November 15th.
Right.
You need to have all of your things in place at that time. And if, like you said, if somebody is donating their time to your organization and they're a professional, you can, what is their, they don't typically work for free, right? And so if they're providing your organization with information and time, absolutely, you can report that time in a way that they can take a write-off on their personal tax return. And then it's a win-win for you, right? Because they're getting a
Right.
deduction on their personal tax return. You're noting it in your books because this is a donation, right? All of those things matter because you need to be able to equate time with money. Time
Right.
is money, right? And so the one thing that I find a lot of times is there's always a donation request, right? Usually people just want capital, right? But if you have, this is capital, so if you can get somebody's brain power, then that can take you to the next level in ways that actual funding can't do. So make sure, but that's why you really need to have the right people in place to make sure that you're tracking the right things, that you're doing all the right things, and that you're reporting all the right things, because this is why that board is so important to talk about, to sit
Right.
around and talk about, hey, who do we need to bring in? Have you tapped them on the shoulder for this? Well, how much time can they invest in this? Well, what is their normal rate for this? And okay, so this is going to be XYZ. You need to have those board meetings on a regular basis to say, and like I said, have the right people around the table, right? Because maybe
Right.
the advisor that you're going to bring in, maybe they become part of your board and then they can actually get paid. Right? So that way you bring the right people in. And a lot of times I find that, and this happens a lot, even on with LLCs, regular LLCs and all of those things. Who do I bring in as my board? I don't really know that many people. I don't really network that much. I'm kind of working this one man zone. That's how you bring people in. You start tapping people on the shoulder that are the right people in the right place and say, hey, I like what you're doing. I would love to see if I can get some of your time. I would love to have you on my board. Here's what you're going to get in return.
Mm-hmm. And I know we're not here to talk about board hierarchy, but I think it's a great point of what you just brought up of looking at how you have this hierarchy of your president, your vice president, and your treasurer, and then you have your at-large board members who are really voting board members, but then you have your advisory board. That advisory board is probably the most important portion of it because that's, to your point, is where you're going to find all your subject matter experts.
Mhm.
And in some cases, they're actually not in the position to be on your board just because of maybe other work that they're doing, but they are in great position to advise you on new, grants that are coming in, new laws. I mean,
Mhm.
just look at what happened this year. We look at the DOJ now is now mandating all organizations to register with the Registry of Treasury or
Mhm.
Charity
And
and
yeah.
Fundraising for
Mm-hmm.
every single state.
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing before.
No.
Now it is, and it's a $25 fee, but should you miss it,
Yeah.
it's $500 a month until you pay it.
Until you pay, yeah. And a lot of
You
that is
know?
happening now, even with the LLCs and trust and all of that, the BOI report. Now it's gotten appealed at this point right now, but who knows? It'll turn once that gets out of court, that requirement is still there. And if you miss that date, it's free to do it. But if you miss that date, it's a penalty in up to I think it's up to $5,000 penalty or something like that. And so just avoiding all of that, just being able to make sure that you know what the requirements are, being able to check those things. Compliance is very important as a nonprofit organization. You need to make sure that you're checking all of your boxes. Otherwise, your status could be revoked. You could be held responsible for actually reporting some of that income as actual taxable income if you're not doing things properly.
Correct. So before we begin to start wrapping up, because I know we're almost at time, you and I get.
So fast.
I would like for you to just walk through what is the experience of a new client coming into Wild Tax and Advisory Services. What can they expect from start to the middle to finish, looking at what your beginning vision is and what your ultimate outcome for every client that you have.
Absolutely. I think one of the best thing about us is that we do an onboarding meeting with our clients. And in that onboarding meeting, we want to find out where your goals are because everybody doesn't have the same goals. Everybody may want a profit, I want to hit this income mark, but ultimately maybe you want to retire from your 9 to 5. Maybe this is part of your retirement. So just figuring out what the goals are. And some people just want to do the organization. They don't want to get they want it just because it's a passion project. And then some people do want to get to level 3 and really take it there. So we just want to find out where you want to go, if you want to stay at level 1, 2, or 3. And then we can help to align with that, right? So we do an onboarding meeting to figure out where you're at, where you want to go, and then we decide how we can best help you with that. We set you up on your account. So you typically will use QuickBooks, or depending on, what type of organization it is, we get your accounts connected in there. We do our, like I said, you get the opportunity to ask any questions. We get you set up, we get everything aligned, we do our initial analysis, send out the report. We'll tell you what's right, what's wrong, all of these things, how we're going to fix things. And then once we get up and running, once we get you fully onboarded, monthly we meet, we talk about what's happening with the books. We make sure that your financial reports are sent to you every month, and then making sure that you're aligned and you're always on point. And then we talk about at what level of service you have. We'll talk about what's happening with those numbers, what those numbers mean, because you should be able to make data-driven decisions. That's really how you should be running your organization. This is what's happening. This is where most of the money is going. Is there a way that we can scale that back a bit to meet our goal a little bit faster? What other pieces do we need to bring in to get to that goal we're trying to get to? So really using the numbers to tell a story, but we get you in, get the numbers reporting, and then we start to talk about what those numbers look like and analyzing them.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Well,
Yeah.
we are just starting out this series, but it's meant to be a gradual level of understanding. We started with bookkeeping mastery for a reason, because next we're going to go into audited financials, and then to the point that you just made of data-driven decisions, and then ultimately tax preparation. So when looking at January, February, March, the goal is to let folks know, like, here is all of the information from the start of the year to the different milestones in this journey that you're going to need financial knowledge to even just be able to make decisions about, but also having a trusted subject matter expert in the space who's obviously knowledgeable, has the proper experience that's needed, and that hand-on ability, which I think is most special about what you do a while on tax, that you have that hands-on. You're not putting people in a position where they feel like they can't catch up with you, which
Absolutely.
is important when building trust. Um,
Absolutely.
especially when touching money, people have gone through a million things in their lives. And so
Mhm.
money is always a touchy conversation. And so when you can have that moment to really establish that respect, that trust, that
Mhm.
they understand that they
Yeah.
can't be on this journey without you.
Yes. And talking to like you said, talking to a real person, it's not like I'm not a bot. You're not going to be talking to bots. My team aren't bots. And then we put a lot of systems in place to just make things smoother for people. So our CRM system has a chat feature, it's secured, it's an accounting platform. So we
Hmm.
can chat with people in there. So when people are uploading documents, it's in a secure space. So we're not emailing important documents back and forth where anybody can grab them. We put all the parameters and securities in place to make sure that your information is protected. I'm very particular about who even works for me because I value my clients' information even more than my own.
Right.
I think the other thing too is a lot of people, one of the things that you brought up too, Shantelle, you talked about tax season, even though the nonprofit's tax date is May 15th. If you're an employee of your nonprofit and you're maybe issuing yourself a W-2, you need to have that out to yourself by January 31st so you can use that to file your own return. So there's so many dots that connect, and it all comes from the books. And I think a lot of times people are like, "Ah, shucks, I didn't know that. I didn't know how this touched that." And everything touches something else. And so this is the foundational piece of it. If this part is off, everything else is awry.
Hmm. So I think what we should do at this point, because we're don't want to run out of time too much. So if anyone has questions, please put them into the box. I have a few different other streams open, so I'm gonna just give you some questions. You're ready
Okay.
to be done.
All right.
So one question we have here is, on average, what is the range for services? Whether it be, and if we just go through the level of, they said startup here, but we're going to do startup to our
Mhm.
level 1 and level 2, level 3. So what is the range of, budget that people just should have in their mindset when just paying for services or even just coming to you?
Yeah, so our basic bookkeeping package for organization starts at 500 a month, right? So that's
Hmm.
basic. And I usually say about 10%. So if you're making at least 5,000 a month, that's in line with that. And then, like I said, you don't have to do monthly to start. If you're in that startup phase, you can do quarterly, or you can have but I recommend that you get something, or at least have us set up your QuickBooks account. So we charge
Hmm.
$1,500 just to get you set up, and then we kind of give you a cheat sheet, right? I don't recommend that you stay there because that's not where you're supposed to be. That's just to get you. That's just to get you functional and making sure that you got the right wheels, and you're putting the right pieces in the puzzle in the right spot. Once you start to bring in at least 5K a month, I say 3K a month, but you want to make sure that you have that bookkeeper on staff,
Right.
because and then not on staff, not in-house, but outsourced to a firm like us, because you want to make sure that you've got an expert doing that. That's not where you need to be. You need to make sure that somebody else is doing that so you can continue to work and grow in the organization. And I feel
Correct.
like when you're trying to wear all of those hats, something's getting dropped. Something's getting dropped. And usually
Something is going to get dropped, and
things
it's
get
you're going
dropped.
to find out with a note in the mail, and you go, "What?"
And the thing that always gets dropped is something that you're just not passionate about. And if you're not in the finance space, typically this is something that you're not really passionate about. You're going to avoid this at all costs because it's going to make you revisit every decision you've made.
Right. So let's see here. Oh yeah, well, you just brought up tools. I heard you say QuickBooks, so we know QuickBooks is a tool that could be used, but are there any other tools that you would suggest people get familiar with? So
Yeah,
uh
I think from the very beginning, from the minute that you start thinking about putting this together, an Excel worksheet or a Google Doc is the place to start. But you want to track everything. In your head is not going to work because you're not going to remember it. And there's too many things you got too many balls in the air, right? So
that
from
is
the
correct.
beginning, you can do a manual profit and loss statement to begin with. And you can also do the balance sheet's not going to be accurate, but you want to list out your assets that you're collecting. If people are making donations, what is the value of those things? right? Because they become part of that organization. You need to be tracking all of those things. When I find a lot of times it's like people are taking things in, but they're not keeping track of what they got going on. And they're not, so you can't depreciate anything. You don't know what the value is anymore. All of these things, it sounds like probably walk, walk, walk to some people, but at the same time, at the level of you getting this nonprofit status, this is a requirement. This is a requirement. So you can start at a worksheet space, and then you need to graduate to a software like QuickBooks Zero. What I don't care for Wave, but QuickBooks Zero, and then to the point of if you're an employee of the organization or you brought in other employees in the organization, payroll. Do we need to bring in Gusto or ADP or paycheck systems for those reporting the W-2s or the 1099s? How are you
Mm-hmm.
the people that you're bringing in? If you're bringing in independent contractors, are you getting the W-9s for them to make sure that you're reporting the 1099s to them at the end of the year? So
Right.
all of those things, these are things that you have to think about, and you don't have to think about it yourself. You can work with our firm or another organization that can help you to make sure that you're doing all those compliance pieces, because you need this to make sure that you can grow and to keep your organization compliant.
See, that's why I have you here, Katrina, because you guys tell the people what's going on, okay? Let's see, let's just do one more question here. I don't see any questions in the chat here, but we do have one more. Um, it's saying, how do you believe AI is going to affect your work moving forward?
Yeah, I think, and this is something I was just having a meeting about yesterday. I think AI will make things a lot easier in the space as far as computing things quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But the one piece that I feel that, and the compliance piece, like the filing of returns, I see that in the future. That'll be an AI solution right there. But as far as the advisory piece and actually having a real person, because I test AI, I love AI. I treat it like my assistant a lot of times, but I tested a lot of times, and the
You and
information
me both.
you gotta, but here's the thing, I'll ask it a question about tax or accounting or something sometimes, and sometimes it's wrong, right? So, but how do you know that's wrong? I know
Right.
it's wrong because of his, because I'm actually in trainings and continuing education, and this is my lifeblood, right? And so this is something, so I look at the piece, I use it as a tool for me to make life easier, right? And I
Right.
think in the space that from a business perspective, I think that all businesses should start adopting it. From the compliance piece, I think it will take away some of those compliance pieces and automate a lot of that. But one thing that you can't get away from, I think, is the actual human knowledge piece of it, and
Human knowledge, human
that
experience.
relationship piece. Yes.
Yeah. Because that's the part that that can't be AI.
No. Mm-mm. No. And
Yeah.
I flip it every which way. I ask it so many questions, and now sometimes I'll make it think that it's wrong, and then or say something to it, and then it's like, oh, I didn't think about that, So
Right. I know
I'll,
for me, one of the AI tools that I really, really love, just as far as like research goes, is Perplexity.
I haven't tried that one.
Perplexity,
I'm writing
girl,
it down.
it's such a cool tool because it's not only just grabbing, number one, it's pulling from books.
Okay.
So it's like someone took the time and created their archive of books inside of its AI tool. It's different from Google because it's actually pulling like actual scholarly references along with
Perfect.
mapping and pictures and things like that. And it just works really, really well. So I've completely replaced the Google search with Perplexity.
Okay, I'm gonna check that out. I got it.
Yeah, because you're right. I mean, I think one of the things that I'm always after, I think that's just a great tool, just keep me sharp, is to surround myself around people who are smarter than me, which I believe that I'm at on such a high level that,
But that's
but being able
important.
to use the tools in that way where you're like, it's almost like I want to break it to make sure like how much of this is going to be real. And you only know if you know the information for sure.
Absolutely. And
And
it's
being
got
able to share that with people is just like, okay, I know the world is moving into DII. I did this myself,
yeah,
but there is a difference from people who actually went through, got certified, did the education, got the degree in it, and are able to provide that life experience to exchange with you that you can't read. that it
Absolutely.
speeds up the process of you, like, why continue to make mistakes that other people have made already when you don't have to? Get the knowledge too. You pay people so you can save money, time, and like, and your energy of trying to figure it out on your own.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think a lot of it too is, like I said, I embrace it, but at the same time, I'm cautious too, because a lot of it is personal information too. And so, how much of that do you want into the atmosphere? We just don't know where it goes. I've been watching a lot of documentaries about it too. And the owner of ChatGPT the founder who he was talking about it. And he was like, it's a blessing, but it's scary at the same time because it's so much faster than our brain works sometimes. He's like, you just don't know in the wrong hands what it could do. And that's really what it is. You want to make sure that you're still keeping your personal information personal, but taking definitely using the tool as the pro features of it, making sure that you put that into play. I'm not a technology avoider. I love it. So it makes
So
my life easier. But wherever I can, get back some time, I try to incorporate that. But what I'm not willing to give up is actually getting real knowledge from somebody that's really a subject matter expert.
correct. All right. Well, it has been a wonderful time speaking with you, Katrina. For those who want to get in contact with you, I know you offer that 15-minute consultation where people can speak. Where can they find you?
You can find me on YouTube. I'm Katrina the Advisor. You can find me. I'm on all the social platforms. I think on Instagram, I'm Tax Whisperer. Facebook, Katrina the Advisor. I'm gonna put my
I put it
I
in there just now.
Perfect. Thank you, Shantelle.
Mhm.
So yeah, so I do have 15 minutes discovery calls for people that are free where we can just chat to see if we're a good fit to work together. I love to do that because then I find out what you need and if you're on the right path, if not, and I just provide you a few suggestions on that call.
And more importantly, you figure out if they are actually going to be a good client for you.
That part, yes, I
Because
find out
all clients are not created equal. And so being able to
absolutely.
do that is important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We find out if we're, compatible or not. So
Right. So I'm so happy we're doing the series and I look forward to the next one. So those who are listening, bookkeeping was today. In January, we have audited financials. In February, data-driven decisions. And then tax preparation come March. So this is not your first or last time hearing from Katrina or myself. These series will continue to go on because we want to be able to provide health briefs because that's what we do here at the SUV Brand Hospital. We help you breathe life back into your organizations and your attention, your collaborations, your compliance, and your engagement to drive impact and increase those donations needed to put your organization in a position where you can be healthy and thriving in the work that you do as you're making the change in the world. With that, we'll bid you adieu. Look forward to the next series and get those pens and papers prepared because we are here to help your organization push forward in an epic way in 2025. We want you to be ethical, profitable, informative, and customized in your approach and in all that you do. So therefore, you can go out there and get that money because there is billions and billions of dollars available for organizations who are making change. With that, see you all the next time and have a happy holiday.
holidays.